Hello, students. Myself Joshi Disha, and I warmly welcome you on behalf of Sri Shivsha College of Commerce, Management and Computer Education, and it is managed by Jain Citizens Education Society. So, yesterday in the last session, we had studied law of production. In that, we had considered the topics that were introduction, meaning, and we had taken an example of production function. Today, we are going to start with the presentation of production function. So, production factor can be presented in many ways. It can be presented in the form of table, an equation, an aggregate, average, and marginal input curve. So, production function is presented in many ways. There are not only one or two methods on the basis of which it can be presented. There are lot many systems through which we can implement it. The examples are table, equation, aggregate average, and marginal input curve. When two inputs are given, they can be shown through the equal input curves or isoquants. So, whenever only two inputs are given, can be shown through the equal input curves or isoquants. Now, the new word has came, that is isoquants. So, what does it mean? An isoquant may be defined as a curve which shows the different combinations of the inputs producing same level of output. We are using different combinations of inputs. Two inputs are there, A and B, and we are using it with the different combinations, 50% A, 50% B, 30% A, 70% B, 70% A, 30% B, etc. So, these are the different combinations of the inputs producing the same level of output. This is known as isoquant. They can also be presented through input-output table. Production function of factor can be presented through input and output table as well. Production function is usually presented in mathematical form. There is a given equation of production function, and that is P equals to F into bracket A. Here, the output depends on a particular output only. That is, P is output and A is input. So, output depends on particular output only. If we want to present that output of a commodity depends on 5 inputs, we can write production function as follows, that is P equals to F into bracket A comma B comma C comma D comma E. So there are 5 inputs A, B, C, D and E, and so P was output and F into bracket we have to take the inputs. So the equation that we had studied was P equals to F into bracket A. But at that time there was only one input. Now there are 5 inputs. So we are including these 5 inputs in a given equation. So our equation is P equals to F into bracket A, B, C, D and E. Here P is equals to output and A, B, C, D and E are 5 types of inputs that we are using. We are going to do processing on that with the use of technology, and finally we are going to get our output. The quality and quantity of these inputs change the output of the commodity. As we had studied earlier, the same point is repeated over here, that quality and quantity of these inputs change the output of the commodity. If we make variation, if we make changes in inputs, quality and quantity, it will definitely reflect in our output. If we are using smaller quantities of input, then we are going to get smaller quantities of output. If we are using cheap raw materials, so we are going to get that type of an output. If we are using good raw materials or good quality of inputs, we are definitely going to get good quality of output. Now, let us take a look over nature of production function. From the point of view of nature, production function are of two types: short-term production function and long-term production function. As the name itself suggests, we can get somewhat idea on basis of this. Short-term and long-term, we are very much aware. Short-term production function. Short-term production is invariable from technical point of view. Invariable means constant, never changes. It is a simple thought that when we are doing planning or when we are doing anything for a shorter period of time, generally it won't take any changes because it is for a shorter period of time. So, here it is said that short-term production is invariable from technical point of view. We do not need to take lot many changes in shorter period of time. That is the reason why quantity of inputs used to make production in certain quantity remain fixed. Whenever we are using inputs, whether it is 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, whatever quantity or quality of inputs is, we never change it in a shorter period of time. It is generally fixed. It is invariable, means we never change it. However, this is a phenomenon based on a principle because in short term also, if output is to be increased, quantity of any one input is increased and the remaining are kept constant. It is not so that almost every time we won't make changes. There are some of the circumstances, there are some of the situations that at that time we need to make some of the changes. So what we do if we are having 5 to 6 inputs, that is, let us take an example of 5 inputs. If we are having 5 inputs, that is A, B, C, D and E. So what we will do in a shorter period of time, in short production function, we will change any one of the inputs. If we are changing A, we will keep B, C, D, E constant. If we are changing B, then the rest of are constant. So this is the system of short-term production function. We changes. It's not so that every time it is fixed. In some of the circumstances, we even change it, but we won't change whole structure. We change only one of the input among all inputs. This aspect of production function is known as law of variable proportion. This aspect is also known as the law of variable proportion. In some of the circumstances, we do change our inputs, quantity or quality of input, but we won't change it as a whole. Almost the things are constant, only one is not constant. We make some changes in that particular thing, and finally we find changes in the output. Now, long-term production function. In long-term production, technical situations may change. As we all know, as I had stated earlier, that on short-term production function, we generally won't change anything in a shorter period of time. But when it comes to long-term production function or a longer period of time, we generally change. We have to make certain changes. because there are lot many factors affecting longer period of time. As we all know, there are internal and external factors. Internal factors are quite controllable, whereas external factors are uncontrollable. We cannot control that. We have to change according to it. Internal factors are those that we can change that factors. It is quite controllable. When certain things happen, it is that are in our hands that we can change it. But when it comes to external factors, it is not in our hands. And at certain period of time, we need to make changes in our inputs. We have to change our inputs. To increase or decrease output, the quantity of all inputs can be changed. Sometimes we need to increase output. At the same time, there are the situations when we need to decrease our output as well. So what we will do, we are going to change all the inputs. By changing all the things, we are having another output. This aspect of production function is connected with returns to scale. The changes in scale are advantageous of economies of scale. Now, what do you mean by economies of scale? A proportionate saving in cost gained by an increased level of production is known as economies of scale. When we are producing on a larger bulk production, bulk production is always advantageous and it always gives you economies of scale. Costs are the same, that doesn't make any big difference, but the profit that you are getting is achieving a greater heights. So that is economies of scale. So in this aspect, we can have an advantage of economies of scale because it is for a longer term. So this is the difference between short-term production function and long-term production function, and it is the nature of production function. So short-term production function is invariable. Generally we won't make any changes in that. But if a situation arises, we change only one input. We won't change it to a larger extent. We won't change it to 3 to 4 inputs. We are generally changing one input and we are getting a particular output. And in long-term production function, we are mandatory to change our all inputs. We cannot adjust with that. We have to change all the inputs, and on basis of that we are getting an output. So today we had taken a look over presentation of production function and nature of production function, or we can say that types of production. Nature. There are two types of production function, that is short-term production function and long-term production function. So thank you students. Hope you are understanding it and going through it very well. Okay, thank you.